Have you ever been listening to a creepy ghost story or haunting history, and you're like, damn, this is so enjoyable, but I wish my friends were here so we could experience it together? That's us, Gina and Catherine, and we'll bring the snacks when you join us on I Scream, You Scream, the podcast where we serve up chilling stories with a side of our favorite ice cream.
Every month, we pick a new flavor of ice cream and a new topic to go along with it. Werewolves, poison, cemeteries, you name it. From deep dives into stories we all thought we knew to your real-world experiences, at this ice cream party, we always get to the bottom of the bowl.
Cozy up with us every Tuesday for your weekly scoop of the most chilling histories, mysteries, and paranormal perplexities. Until then, keep it cool.
And keep it creepy with I Scream, You Scream wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell you scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse wherever you stream podcasts. Just be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. An important note: sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. Let's start with 3 horrifying and tragic realities. First, human beings have committed the worst atrocities against each other. Assaults of all kinds, murder, ethnic cleansing, slavery, genocide, and more. Second, these atrocities transcend time, era, civilization, culture, and geography. And for as long as human beings have existed, they've committed horrific and unspeakable acts. And third, vulnerable and marginalized people and populations have been, and continue to be, consistently targeted and victimized by a dominant individual or group who use their authority, power, and influence to do whatever they want at the expense of others. Less than 10 kilometers from Venice, Italy, situated in the Venetian Lagoon, lies Poveglia Island, a tiny abandoned island that has the reputation of being one of the most haunted places in the world. Known as Plague Island, the Island of No Return, and the Island of Ghosts, Poveglia Island's history is dark and tragic, with some alleging as many as 160,000 people having died there, and who to this day still haunt it. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the tragic history and haunting of Poveglia Island. What happened off the shores of Italy that caused it to have such a dramatic reputation? And is Poveglia Island truly haunted? I'll share the details. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. There are times when real life and history are darker and scarier than anything conjured on film or written on paper. Poveglia Island fits this perfectly. Just south of Venice, Poveglia is actually a group of 3 islands. One is covered entirely in vegetation. Another has buildings and was the location for its population. And a third, the smallest, is shaped like an octagon and was used as a fort to protect the islands and the mainland. Inhabitants first came to the island in the 7th century, where for several hundred years it grew into a small, peaceful community away from the mainland Italian peninsula. One article stated, quote, For years, this small community lived in peace and avoided the continent's laws and taxes. Over time, it became a thriving center, both economically and demographically. The local families took care of fishing and salting, and because of its position within the lagoon, from a commercial point of view, it could have excellent relations with the nearby Palestrina." End quote. Towards the end of the 14th century, the island experienced a rapid decline following the Chioggia War, which forced the population to evacuate to Venice. And while many thought they would be back to Poveglia within a short time, the island remained unoccupied for several hundred years, until it was eventually used as both a storage station and then a quarantine zone for the Black Plague. Throughout the Middle Ages, all the way through the late 18th century, Poveglia came under the control of the Public Health Office, and it was initially used as a type of customs control, regulating the movement of both imports and people. This didn't last long, and within a short time, Poveglia's purpose changed entirely. It was repurposed as a location for plague control. One fateful day, 2 ships stopped at Poveglia for a routine customs check. Except in addition to carrying goods, they were also carrying several passengers sick with the Black Plague. 2 nearby islands, Lazzaretto Nuovo and Lazzaretto Vecchio, were quarantine sites, except both were full, and with nowhere to take the sick and dying, Poveglia immediately became a third quarantine site. The plague, also referred to as the Black Plague, and more infamously, the Black Death, was one of the most devastating pandemics in human history. In what seemed an impossibly short time, it spread across Asia and Europe, killing tens of millions of people. Technically, there are 3 types of plague: bubonic plague, septicemic plague, and pneumonic plague. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, quote, "Bubonic plague occurs when bacteria multiply in a lymph node near where the bacteria entered the human body. Patients develop fever, headache, chills, and weakness, and 1 or more swollen, painful lymph nodes. Septicemic plague can occur as the first symptom of plague, or may develop from untreated bubonic plague. This form results from bites of infected fleas or from handling an infected animal. Patients develop fever, chills, extreme weakness, abdominal pain, shock, and possibly bleeding into the skin and other organs. Skin and other tissues may turn black and die, especially on fingers, toes, and the nose. Pneumonic plague develops when bacteria spread to the lungs of a patient with untreated bubonic or septicemic plague, or when a person inhales infectious droplets coughed out by another person or animal with pneumonic plague. Patients develop fever, headache, weakness, and a rapidly developing pneumonia with shortness of breath, chest pain, cough, and sometimes bloody or watery mucus. Pneumonic plague is the most serious form of the disease, and is the only form of plague that can be spread from person to person. As if that weren't scary enough, untreated plague kills quickly and efficiently, with pneumonic plague resulting in death 18 to 24 hours after the onset of symptoms. Septicemic plague resulting in death 3 to 5 days after the onset of symptoms, though in some cases death can occur within 24 hours. And bubonic plague resulting in death 3 to 5 days after the onset of symptoms, though in some cases, death can take up to 10 days. Something interesting. The children's nursery rhyme Ring Around the Rosy is often associated with the plague, where rosies mean rashes. Posies hide the smell of sickness and death, and ashes mean cremation. There are many, however, who believe the connection between the plague and the song is nothing more than myth and urban legend. Even if that's the case, it's still dark. Imagine for a moment you're experiencing the onset of plague symptoms. A high fever that renders you nearly immobile, chills that sink deep into your bones, a throbbing headache that feels like you're caught in a vice, and swollen, painful bumps on your body. You know others experiencing similar symptoms are taken away in barges for a 40-day isolation period. You've heard the stories and rumors that those who go never come back. But maybe you'll be different. Maybe you'll be lucky. Maybe you'll be one of the rare few to make it back from Poveglia Island with your health intact. Except when you arrive and disembark from the barge, you discover things are far worse than you could have imagined. The sick and dying are all around. The smell of illness, death, and decay fill the air. The screams of pain and agony flood your ears. And maybe for the first time, you realize how borderline helpless this place really is. Maybe it's actually hell on earth. Some estimates place the number of dead on Poveglia Island between 100,000 and 160,000 people, the majority of whom died from the plague. I mentioned earlier that the island is rather small. In fact, it's approximately 17 acres, or the size of approximately 13 football fields. For a different perspective, there were over 5,800 people per acre, and that represents the number of people who died at minimum. The situation was dire, and as the bodies piled up, authorities had to make tough decisions to deal with all of it. Panic spread as quickly as the plague across the islands, with one article stating, quote, "About 500 people a day used to die in Lazzaretto Vecchio. Corpse carriers simply had no time to take care of the burials. It looked like hell. The sick lay 3 or 4 in a bed." End quote. Authorities resorted to cremating the bodies en masse or burying them in mass graves. One macabre legend suggests that 50% of the soil on Poveglia Island is made up of human remains, either buried and decomposed, or cremated and turned to ash. One article stated, quote, "When plague victims died, they were thrown into mass graves. Workers collected the dead and threw them in the graves all day without a break. Often the dying ones and the ones too sick to move or talk were taken for dead and thrown on the piled corpses." End quote. For hundreds of years, Poveglia Island served as one of the most important quarantine zones in Italy. That is, until 1814, when it was shut down and abandoned for the next 100 plus years. We'll explore Poveglia Island's rebirth and claims of paranormal activity after this quick ad break. In 1922, 108 years after it was initially abandoned, a psychiatric hospital was built on the island, and almost immediately, rumors of paranormal activity took center stage. It was alleged that one of the doctors, obsessed with curing insanity, performed unauthorized and inhumane experiments on various patients. In fact, it's one of the darkest legends tied to the island. According to the lore, and at least one article, the doctor was a hospital director whose obsession with curing insanity went beyond his responsibilities as a doctor. It was alleged that, quote, "he performed crude lobotomies and experimental procedures using primitive tools, chisels, hammers, hand drills, often without anesthesia." End quote. Over time, his experiments drove him mad, though in fairness, he was already mad to begin with. And patients and staff alike claimed he was being haunted by the spirits of those who died during the plague. The spirits were said to haunt him day and night, driving him further into psychosis. According to some, he claimed to see shadow figures standing and moving in otherwise empty rooms, heard voices calling him from different parts of the island, and saw faces in the walls of the hospital. One fateful day, the doctor/director, having been brought to the brink by the tormenting spirits, climbed to the top of the bell tower and threw himself down. Except, He didn't die on impact. In fact, he survived the fall, but was alleged to have been strangled by a mysterious force, or possibly by a hospital staff member. One article stated, quote, "Another legend concerns the suicide of the mental hospital director, defined as, quote, a sadistic doctor who, forced by spirits, went to the clock tower to jump off. A nurse who had witnessed the incident said that he did not die on the ground, but was suffocated by a strange fog that had spread from the ground into his body, leaving him lifeless." End quote. The hospital director wasn't the only one who claimed to have witnessed paranormal activity on Poveglia Island. Patients and hospital staff alike claimed to have heard a bell ringing from the bell tower, despite the tower not having a bell installed. Others claimed to have heard screams drifting across the water, especially at night. Many have seen shadow figures standing in hallways or the corners of rooms, with one infamous shadow figure said to roam the outdoor ruins late at night. Visitors to the island have claimed to feel an overwhelming sense of dread, anxiety, and sadness. Mental health treatment in the early 20th century was little more than rudimentary, with those experiencing debilitating mental illness often abandoned in institutions, left uncared for, and tragically abused. Forced lobotomies were common, as were physical restraints, and electroconvulsive therapy. Patients were routinely dismissed, segregated, isolated, and often seen as incurable, resulting in long-term or permanent institutionalization. One article stated, quote, "Throughout the 18th century and up to the mid-1900s, individuals with mental illness, particularly those with severe mental problems, were often institutionalized in state mental hospitals, also referred to as insane asylums. Hospitals were grossly overcrowded and understaffed, with often appalling living conditions." End quote. Poveglia Island was no different. But is it really haunted? That might be more difficult to discern, because the psychiatric hospital was closed for good in 1968, and the island was abandoned and officially closed to the public. In the most technical sense, Poveglia Island is off-limits to tourists and is closely guarded by the Italian government, though special allowances have been made for television specials and paranormal investigators. Something interesting. The story of the hospital director, as compelling and shocking as it sounds, may not actually be rooted in reality. There are no official records of a sadistic doctor performing cruel experiments, nor is there any evidence that he jumped from the bell tower. In fact, it's possible, even likely, that the hospital director didn't even exist, and the entire story is nothing more than an urban legend. But the history of Poveglia Island, its use as a quarantine zone during the plague, the tragedy of over 100,000 people dying, and the mass cremations and burials, all of that is true. According to one article, quote, "Across the vast tapestry of human culture, the concept of ghosts weaves a consistent thread, often depicting different types of spirits as the lingering essence of individuals unable to move on from the mortal realm. This inability to transition is frequently attributed to unfinished business, be it a yearning for resolution, a desire for vengeance, or simply an unfulfilled purpose. Other types of ghosts are believed to remain due to powerful attachments to the physical world, a beloved home, cherished possessions, or the echoes of significant life events that bind them to specific locations. Tragic or unsatisfactory deaths, marked by violence, suddenness, or injustice, are also commonly cited as reasons for spirits to remain earthbound, their unrest fueling paranormal activity. Other theories suggest that many types of ghosts are not aware beings, but rather energetic imprints, residual echoes of intense emotions, traumatic experiences, or even the very life force of those who have passed. These imprints may replay themselves within a location, creating repeatable phenomena without any intentional interaction. While fictional narratives often offer imaginative and sometimes scientifically sound explanations for spectral existence, the scientific community largely explores psychological factors like suggestion, pareidolia, and altered states of perception, alongside environmental factors such as infrasound and electromagnetic fields, as potential influences on perceived paranormal experiences. By engaging with these interpretations, enthusiasts can cultivate a deeper sense of wonder and intellectual intrigue and foster a richer appreciation for the diverse beliefs surrounding the types of spirits that may or may not walk among us. End quote. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with these lingering questions. Is Poveglia Island truly one of the most haunted locations on Earth? Or is its dark and tragic history scarier than anything lingering there? I've shared the details. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.